This is really an interesting opportunity for this particular session. A lot of times we don't think about, even though we are an international organization and we have people from virtually every background imaginable across the globe. Sometimes we don't think about that here right in our own backyards. And we have invited Raj and Berlinda to have a conversation about what that all entails. So, Berlinda, Raj, you have the floor.
Can I go ahead and start now?
I think that would be great.
Thank you. Well, discrimination comes in many forms and many names. Discrimination by color, caste, gender, to name few. My name is Raj Bukkapatnam. I am from India. We have the combination of all those types of discriminations back there. Person of color is not just a thing in America. As a person of color, can any of you guess where the discrimination started in my life? Mr. Chair, other dignitaries, my fellow Toastmasters, and our wonderful guests today. Discrimination in my life started in my own house, in my own family, and you heard it right. Well, in fact, it is only in my family I was discriminated for my color of the skin, not the society, not the community. You see, there is an internal pride that every family feels when they have a fair-skinned people in their house. I was comparatively an ugly duckling in the family. Since I can remember my childhood, my grandmother has always called me, you black thing, always. I can never remember she ever called me with my actual name even once. After a point, that wouldn't even bother me. I would respond back when she called me with that name because I accepted. I accepted that my skin color is black and she's just telling me that. I knew she loved me, but it's just that thing that people look down when you have a dark skin in your own family. When I was 8 years or maybe a little older, my maternal uncle, he told me several times, hey, you know what? You're not born in our family. You're brought from outside. And I said, no, that's not true. And he would say, no, look at your color and compare with the others in our family. Do you see anybody as dark as you are? And that's true. Nobody was as dark as I was. I knew it was not true. But anytime my parents favored my siblings and they supported them instead of me, I would remember that. See, that was right. What my uncle told, my parents are not supporting me. So I was not born in that family. For a few years, I did truly believe that I was not born in the family. I grew out of it and now I laugh about it. But as a child, for several years, that bothered me. I have always been my dad's pet child. But unknowingly, he has always discriminated. He is so ignorant about it. He wouldn't even know, even today. As growing up, you see, whenever we go out for shopping, I would pick a bright color outfit and I would ask my dad, how is this? And he would say, oh, that would look so good on your sister because she's so fair. And it's not just one time. Every single time I pick a bright color, he would say the same thing. Even today, he says the same thing. He has no clue. Then eventually I started feeling that, oh, because I am dark skinned, bright colors don't suit me. I accepted that. I accepted. And I have never worn a bright color outfit all my childhood, all my teenage, until I was almost after 25. Until then, I was always wearing a tanned color or a light color because my dad said, oh, that looks good on you. In India, having a fair color is considered a privilege. And if you don't have one, you're something less than the best. My skin color really never bothered me with my social life, my friends, my education, my career, even in my marriage. But it's just that thing that you face. What I faced back there is the family prejudice. Another discrimination, which is very predominant in India, is gender discrimination, especially in rural areas. Female babies were used to be killed after they were born. And once the technology has improved, the female babies are being aborted in the womb because female baby proves to be expensive for economically backward communities. You see, there is something called dowry. And you have a female child, you have to give dowry to get her married. But if you have a boy, you get the dowry, get the money into the family. And socially, a male child is expected to take care of their parents, and the female child is just an expense, not profitable. And religiously, only a male child can do a final rituals for parents after death. And if you don't get your final rituals done by your son, you are considered, your soul is considered to not rest in peace. With all those, India has come a long way in solving this social issue, but this thing still happens at different levels, depending upon your social or economical situations. While taking care of the kids and household chores is a natural instinct for women, but it is quite a mandatory responsibility for women in India. In spite of women dominating men in education, in job market, politics, and even in leadership areas, in general, for the vast majority, women is considered to be, they should be subservient. The expectation is they should be subservient and they should be confined to the household activities. Even in a well-educated families, this discrimination happens in a very subtle way. I'll tell you a good example. You all must be aware of Indira Nooyi. She's the former CEO of PepsiCo. She's from India, and she mentioned in one of her interviews, she was pretty sportive about it. She was laughing at it. When she was nominated as a CEO for PepsiCo, she was so excited, and she called home. Her mother-in-law picked the phone, and she told, oh, I am nominated as CEO. And mother-in-law said, you know what, I don't care. We are out of milk on your way. Could you please get some milk? Irrespective of what a woman does outside, they are still expected to take care of everything in their houses. And we accept it. We think we need to take care of our career along with every single thing that we have always done in the house. A lot of pressure, but we accept it. When coming to the challenges we face in America, you see, most of the Indians, they come to America with a master's degree or for a master's degree. So education is one of the very most important necessities for a middle-class Indian. Anything less than a master's is not acceptable for us. And for the same reason, when we come to this country, we come as experts and land in a pretty decent job where we can support our family and economically do very well. However, many of us do face the language barrier, and that could possibly become the reason for discrimination at work in this country. You see, in India, the famous quote we have always heard is, talk less, work more. And we are not encouraged to ask many questions, whether in school or even in the house. And especially for women, it is even more difficult because you see, Indian women We are not encouraged to speak, especially when male members are around. It is considered as disrespectful for women to speak when men are around. So in spite of English medium education, women are culturally adapted to speak less. Things have changed quite a bit in India since I left. It's been 23 years I left the country. But I'm still surprised to see so many younger women who come to this country, they still lack that speaking communication or communication skills, and they don't have that confidence. They are hesitant to speak their mind. They even can't even form an opinion for that matter and take a stance. We are good at doing our jobs, but when it comes to the presentation or articulating the work we have done, we back off. And the credit goes to the person who can articulate the work. We feel the pain. We don't get the credit, but we accept it. We know that we're not good in English. We can't speak good. And we still have our job. Well, let the credit go to somebody who can speak. And that's where the Toastmaster plays a very important role in our community. There is so much potential for Indian women if they believe in themselves. I have conducted a speech craft last year for women's only. It was pretty successful, and I am so motivated to conduct more workshops in the coming years. Coming to the person of color in this country, I have to say, I personally never felt that I was discriminated against my color in this country. But it's not until last year it really started hitting me personally for being a person of color in this country. You see, my son, he's a 2020 high school graduate, and he went to college in fall of 2020. As a mother, I have been dreading for that moment for the last several years and trying to mentally prepare myself to let my son go to college. Well, at the same time, I was constantly worried about him, whether is he going to study well, is he going to make any bad friendships, any distractions, get into drugs and drinking problems, is he going to complete his college? Is he going to be a successful person going forward, landing in a decent job? And all those fears were surrounded me. But 2020 has changed a lot for me. Starting right from the George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, and the recent case of Dante Wright, and several other hatred killing of Black people by white supremacists, I started fearing danger that I never thought even existed for my son. I started getting so conscious about the color of my skin and my son's color of skin, because he's even darker than I am. It is not the criminal background. It is not the unacceptable social behavior or an economical condition anymore to become a victim of a person of color. You can become a victim of your color by any crazy person walking on the street with a gun in their hands. Now my fears of my son, who is in college, shifted from having him not complete his degree, not landing in a job, to I just want him to be safe. I just want him to be alive. If he can't get a job, that's okay. If he can't finish his college, that's okay. But I want him to be safe. In the past, I have accepted many things. But when it comes to my child, I can't. And I won't accept that his skin color can threaten his life in this country. And now I do see the pain of all those Black parents who have lost their children in the hands of either police or some crazy people. They have accepted it for too long, and they can't do it anymore. Like many of you, I was closely watching the Derek Chauvin's case, and I was extremely happy about the verdict. But one thing has always bothered me all through, and it still bothers me. If something so obvious, like George Floyd's case, that happened in the bright daylight, on the street, in front of so many witnesses, many of them even videotaping the whole incident, there was still fear in our hearts. And there was that doubt that Derek Chauvin could go free after all this. And imagine if that was the situation in that case, what about other cases where it happens in an interior areas where the recordings are not available and there are no witnesses, it happens in the dark in the night? Do those Black people even stand a chance in the court? Reform need to happen to the policies, to the societies, and our mindset. Whether it is a color discrimination, gender discrimination, cultural discrimination, when we see something is not right, let's not accept it. And let's speak up and tell people how we feel about it. And there is a big chance that people will understand eventually. Mr. Chair.
At this time, I'm going to move on, if that's okay with Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. In the lyrics of Marvin Gaye, what's going on? Mother, mother, there's too many of you crying. Brother, 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 there's too many of you dying. You know, we've got to find a way to bring some loving here today. Father, Father, we don't need to escalate. War is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. Picket lines and picket signs. Don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me so you can see what's going on. Nelson Mandela says, no one is born hating another person because of the color of their skin or their background or religion. If people can learn to hate, people can learn to love. Thank you, Madam Chair, fellow Toastmasters, honored dignitaries, and guests for this honor and opportunity to speak to you today in color about racism in our Toastmasters and in our community. We are living in a world of change, uncertainty, and turbulence. But this afternoon, I will share with you my personal story about racism, how it has stretched me, and the challenges that I have encountered. What I want you to know about racism and how can we be better together as Toastmasters and a community. Sitting in an all-staff meeting, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm the only Black person in the organization, feeling like the pink elephant in the room. I wondered if anyone cared or if anyone saw my pain. I soon learned how implicit bias affects others' understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner towards me. Still half awake when suddenly I hear someone says, "Good morning, everyone." Tuning in to see who this person might be, I see the deputy director. She's standing in front of the room, excited and eager to view the agenda. And as she reads through the agenda, I hear the meeting would include honoring Juneteenth as well as talking about racism, which of course prompted me to sit up and pay close attention, expecting that she would shed some light on racism and it would lead to an education moment about Black history. I took notice, only to be disappointed. You see, when you and I say, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I ask you, is there one nation under God? Is there indivisible? Is there liberty and justice for all? And in case you're uncertain of what indivisible means, I will explain. Indivisible means blended, undivided, united. We are not the divided states of America. We are the states of the United States of America. Then there are the words that follow: liberty and justice for all. See, the last time I looked, liberty was defined as freedom, and justice was defined as fairness for all of us. Life begins because a baby fights for freedom, and songs we love to sing have a freedom theme. You see, some have walked through fire and flood to find a place of freedom, and some have faced hell itself for the freedom dream. But still, there's not freedom for all of us. Dr. Martin Luther King said, "I still have a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. One day, this nation will rise up and live up to its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." I also have a dream that I too will live in a nation where I will not be judged by the color of my skin, but by the content of my character. But this is not my actual truth. This is my hope. At my last place of employment, I was called nigger. I was called colored girl, but no one addressed it. I reported the incident to the executive director, the highest ranking person in charge, and nothing happened. I reported it to my boss, and nothing happened. You see, my issue was never addressed. There was complete silence on the matter until June 19th, 2020. At our all-staff meeting, the executive director decided she would give a tribute to Juneteenth and talk about racism. However, there was no tribute, nor did she talk about racism. Instead, she justified it. She said, "I am just so sorry about what's going on in the world right now. I am just lost for words." Speechless. She then moved on with the meeting. For those of you who don't know, Juneteenth is the oldest known celebration honoring the end of slavery in the United States. According to the African American Museum, after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued on January 1st, 1863, owners in many isolated areas kept word from the people they had enslaved so they would not flee. On June 19th, 1865, some of the last enslaved people in America was freed from the news. At last had reached Galveston, Texas. Since that day, Juneteenth has been celebrated to honor the African Americans who built this nation. Juneteenth is a part of Black history, American history, that was whitewashed out of white history books. Juneteenth represents my ancestors who sweated great drops of blood for this country we call home. Yet they, like me, we are not able to enjoy it. Sitting in that meeting enraged, I raised my hand with emotions high and heartfelt grief. I said, I am so disappointed with everyone in this room right now. No one in this workplace has taken the time to reach out and ask me how I am doing, how my family is doing after the death of George Floyd. You said we were a family, yet not one person in this room reached out to check on me. Instead, I have been made to feel invisible, devalued, and overlooked. I was the pink elephant in the room. And everyone walked around as though I did not exist. But then I said, I will not be silent. I will stand up and I will use my voice. I will not stand on the sideline lurking in the dark, waiting for someone else to say what I need to say. When suddenly, someone in the room spoke, trying to reverse their guilt back onto me by saying, I'm so sorry that you're having to experience this. Instead of their comment comforting me, it empowered me. I said, I don't want to be judged by the color of my skin, but by the content of my character. That racism is not a Black person's problem, but a white person's problem. That Black people have been made to carry the burden. I don't want special treatment. I want equal treatment. And what do I want you to know today? That every time my husband, my son, or I walk out the door, get into our car, close the garage, we don't know if we will be stopped by the police. Simply because we could be driving suspiciously, or we could be seen as a suspect who just committed a crime. But you, on the other hand, when you leave home, you never think about whether or not you'll get home safe. You don't worry about if you get stopped by the police, fearing for your life. Why? Because you're considered a white privilege. Peggy McIntosh of Wesley College, she described white privilege as this: an invisible packet of unearned resources that white people can count on cashing in every day. White privilege is an invisible, weightless knapsack of special provisions, maps, passports, and blank checks. And if you're confused right now, let me just give you a few examples of ways white people have white privilege because of the color of your skin. You can be in the company of people of your color all the time without being subjected to racial profiling. Why? Because you're white privileged. You can go grocery shopping by yourself and not be followed or harassed by the salesperson. Why? Because you're white privileged. You can be certain that your children will be given the curriculum material that testifies to the existence of their colored skin. Why? Because you and your children are white privileged. Let me be honest here. Up until George Floyd's death, seeing him laying there on the ground with Derek Chauvin's knee on his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. George Floyd was handcuffed and lying on the ground, begging for his life, calling for his dead mom, while he peed on himself and repeated, "I can't breathe." I too sit on the sideline lurking in the dark, waiting, hoping someone would stand up. But here's the thing. There was such a conviction in me that would not let me be silent. For 2 weeks, I cried, I sobbed, I wept, because I realized that George Floyd could have been my husband or my son, laying on the ground, crying out, "I can't breathe," while others looked on, watching him be discriminated, dehumanized, disrespected as a grown man. It was in that moment that I cried out. And I said, "God, forgive me. Forgive me for being silent. I repented for not speaking up, for not standing up for what was right, for looking in the dark, waiting for someone else to stand up." But then I lifted my hands and I said, "No more. No more will I be silent. I will use my voice. I will speak up." Today, I challenge each one of you to stop believing what you have been taught about Black people and about brown people. Come from behind your traditions. Stop clinging to your white privilege and acknowledge that you just might be a part of the problem. Be willing to grow. Learn about Black history. Be quiet and listen. Be humble. I don't have all the answers, and I too have had to confess that I have some prejudice, some racism in my heart. But here's the difference. I don't want it there. You see, we are all a work in progress. And for change to continue, we must all be willing just to move the needle, but move it in the right direction. Let's get off the sideline and let's meet in the middle where change happens. I encourage you, get to know Black people, brown people, someone who doesn't look like you. Get uncomfortable. Make friends with them. See this as a gift that Raj and I are giving you today, that we're coming to you in love, even if you don't deserve it. Focus on seeing people as human. We can be better as Toastmasters, as a community, simply by willing to change your perspective. As the late Congressman John Robert Lewis said, let's get into good trouble, necessary trouble, and let's help redeem the souls of America. When you and I see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you and I have an obligation to speak up. We have to say something. We have to do something. Let's widen our eyes so we can widen our view. Let's refuse hate because it's easier and it takes less work to overcome. Let's not pass judgment on one another because we look different, because we talk different, react different. But let us choose the one thing we're all capable of giving, and that's love. Because only love can conquer hate. Again, my Toastmasters sisters and brothers, I ask you, what's going on? Thank you. At this time, we would open up for questions, comments, if any.
I want to start off by thanking both you and Raj for doing this. When I proposed that we have some people of color talk about their experience, I had no idea that it would be such a powerful and challenging thing. So I just want to say, on my behalf and on the behalf of the conference, thank you so much for stepping out of the comfort zone and sharing your thoughts and your heartfelt concerns with us. Who else has got a question or a comment? Let's see. Tamara also wants to thank you for sharing the powerful truth.
Hi, it's Dana here. Thank you so much for sharing. I guess a question is, how do you cope personally? I know that how do you personally cope to wrestle with all the stuff that you talk about? And then secondly, do you have any advice for how to deal with ignorant people who just refuse to love?
I will start, and Raj, you can chime in. So how do I deal with situations such as this? You have to understand that I was born into this. My grandparents, so it's been a generational thing that each generation teaches each generation as to how we're to behave, how we're to talk. We talk different when we're with white people. We behave different when we're with white people. Why? Because we don't want to be perceived as a troublemaker. And so, for example, when we're in Von Mar, I've had it happen to me. I've had sales associates come up to me and follow me around the store the whole entire time that I was there. And I just simply said, "Excuse me, can I help you?" "Oh, I was just curious if there was something I could help you with." No, she followed me around because she thought I might just take something. And I know that to be a fact because I worked at that store. I worked at one of the stores, and I noticed how they treated Black people, brown people, in comparison to white people.
And from my side, I feel like, again, from my perspective, we should act the way we are. I mean, we try to accommodate, or we try to act differently than what we are. And that's when I feel like we are not really building that bridge for, say, all the festivals or all the rituals, religious activities, cultural activities that we do. We shy away from doing that. If people know that I'm doing that, they might look down on me, or this is different than what they do. Instead of that, I personally do encourage inviting all my co-workers to my house when I'm doing one of those rituals, for them to see what we do, how we celebrate. Whether they like it or not, it's a different story, but I don't want to hide it. I don't want to act differently than what I am. Whether they accept it or not, it's up to them, but me being myself is what I want to, or I practice that.
Just to add to that, up until 2 years ago, I always wore my hair straight, hoping that I would be perceived in my profession as someone who was credible. However, after last year's encounter at my last place of employment, being racially discriminated, I soon discovered whether my hair was straight or naturally curly or kinky curly, as some of you might call it, I was still, at the end of the day, just a Black person. And I was still looked at through the eyes of a white person, totally different. And so, Dana, you asked, how can we help those who are ignorant? People choose to be ignorant. And I say this simply because in today's time, there is just too much happening on the news. There's too much publicity, social media. People choose to hang on to their old traditions, their belief of what they've been taught, because truthfully, they have been taught that white supremacist, white privilege rank. And if you're white, you have the right to be nasty to people of color, to pretend like they don't exist. I do think since the George Floyd's verdict, I do believe it has opened people's eyes of all color, and they recognize. I love the song that Sam Cooke sings. It's been a long time coming, but change is coming. And it started with that verdict. We have a long ways to go. And while Raj and I celebrated, we know this is just one victory. There are yet many to come.
True. That is true. It's just the beginning.
And so I ask you guys today, I beg, let not Raj and my story be just a good presentation. I pray that you are convicted to your core, that when you leave this presentation, that you will begin to look at opportunities that you have missed because of your white skin color and not standing up for what you know is right and what is fair. For those of us who do not have the voice that you do, you have the opportunity to make a difference. You have an opportunity to say the things that we are not able to say, to make that change happen. So I hope today that you will have heard something that will prompt you to say, I need to do something different. I need to be different. I need to get some people of color friends. Does anybody else have any questions? Comments? There was, while Raj and I were preparing, I think this would be appropriate. Raj, would you mind sharing with the audience about your perspective about Black people when you first came to America? I think that is so appropriate for this conversation.
Thank you for bringing that, Berlinda. We did discuss briefly about, when we come from India, the experienced people or so-called, they do give us some tips of what to do, what not to do, things like that. Especially when we came to Chicago, the first thing that they said is, don't go to downtown in the night or after it gets dark. stay away from the Black people. If they come, and I have experienced, they just come and ask for some money, and they say that we got the advice that just give it away, don't contradict, stay away. And that's what, unfortunately, that's the whole thing. That's the people do think like that. But after a while, after my son was born, the changes that these kids bring, I really appreciate how they think, and they bring in a completely different perspective of why should you be afraid of just a black color? If somebody is black, there's nothing for you to be afraid of. And he has taught me several lessons that I'm so appreciative of that. And I'm so thankful that he, or this generation, thinks in a much higher level than what we, or the predetermined information that we come with.
Mm. And as we were talking, I said to Raj how interesting that she was told to be afraid of Black people. And when I was growing up, I was told something very similar, that after dark, never find yourself in a white neighborhood because you probably won't make it home safe. So you see, these are stories that continue to be passed on from generation to generation. And what we want you to know, you have the power to say no more. No more will that tradition be passed on. No more will I continue to tell that story. Because really, I live in an all-white neighborhood. And yes, I have been called the gardener, the maid, but it didn't make me get up, just uproot and leave. No, I took the opportunity last year after I was racially profiled at my last place of employment, and I went to my neighbors, door to door, and I asked them if we could sit down and have a conversation about racism. And to my surprise, they were like, oh my God, I've wanted to have this conversation, but I didn't know how to bring it up. So people are hungry. People want to know, but they don't know how to start a conversation. So I just went down the block, just knocking on doors. And so perhaps you as white people, maybe that's what you need to do. Start engaging with Black and brown people. Ask the hard questions. And yes, you might walk away hurt, wounded, but be willing to listen to what they have to say and then apply it if you can.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Okay? Yes.
Okay. So, in your experience, do you feel like the younger generation is more accepting? Or do you feel like too many things are being passed down from the older generation to the younger generation that's not making a change?
I will answer, and Raj, I would like if you would piggyback. I think that the younger generation, Generation X and Z, they are open-minded. My son and my niece, when Cedar Rapids had the march downtown last year, they both participated, and they came back and they said, Mom, my son said, Mom, I wish you could have been there. Everybody laid on the ground for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And he said, it was so phenomenal. And as I looked around, there were more white people, young people my age, who were laying on the ground because they believe that Black lives matter. So yes, I do believe that the younger generation have come into the truth, and they are willing to stand up for what they believe.
And I do agree with Berlinda on that. With seeing this in younger generation, I feel like we have to trust them, and we have to really follow them with what they're doing. They really don't care about what skin it is, who you are. They, I feel like, yeah, they are going in the right direction, and we just need to support them, what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Berlinda and Raj, for being vulnerable and giving us a look at ways to look at things we've probably not looked at as intently as we need to.